Jamal Harris walked into the office at 9 sharp, adjusting his tie and checking the schedule on his phone. He carried himself with quiet confidence, the kind of steady composure that came from years of proving himself through diligence and hard work. The mid-sized tech company he worked for had a modern, open-concept design glass walls, sleek desks, and bright lights, but beneath its professional polish, Jamal had learned there were subtle undercurrents of bias that he had to navigate carefully. Morning. Jamal, his colleague Priya, called from her desk. Got those reports ready for the meeting? Jamal nodded. Yes, everything's updated. I also ran the analytics for the project proposal. Figured we could get ahead of any questions. Priya smiled. You're always prepared. I don't know how you do it. Jamal shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Just trying to stay on top of things. He walked past the rows of cubicles, noticing the casual chatter of his teammates. People seemed relaxed, but Jamal had learned that office politics could be treacherous. Sometimes the quietest smiles hid judgment. He reminded himself to stay focused. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to do his work well. At the top of the office hierarchy was Mark Reynolds, Jamal's direct supervisor. Mark had a polished demeanor and a smile that didn't always reach his eyes. He was the kind of boss who praised publicly but criticized subtly, and, more often than Jamal liked, unfairly. Jamal, Mark called across the open floor as he approached the team. Can I see your report before the meeting? I don't want any surprises. Of course, Mark, Jamal replied, handing over the neatly formatted report. He had double-checked every number, every line item. Mark scanned it quickly, frowning. I don't know. This part here doesn't follow the standard procedure. Are you sure you did this right? Jamal felt a familiar tightness in his chest. I followed the protocol exactly as outlined in the manual. I double-checked everything before submitting it. Mark's lips pressed into a thin line. Well, we'll see in the meeting. I can't have mistakes in front of the clients. Jamal nodded, keeping his calm. This wasn't the first time Mark had singled him out, and he suspected it wouldn't be the last. The office environment itself seemed neutral, almost welcoming modern furniture, motivational posters, collaborative spaces, but Jamal had learned to notice the subtleties. In meetings, he often saw colleagues' eyes glaze over when he spoke. His ideas were occasionally appropriated or dismissed, only to be praised later if repeated by someone else. He had experienced microaggressions, backhanded compliments, offhand jokes, assumptions about his capabilities at home. Jamal's family reminded him of his worth, but at work, he had to constantly prove it. Later that morning, the team gathered for a critical project meeting. Jamal presented his findings with clarity, outlining potential strategies and solutions. The room fell silent as he spoke, some colleagues nodding in approval. But Mark leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen with a smirk. Interesting, Jamal, he said. But I think maybe this isn't the way we usually do things. Maybe someone else can explain it in a way we all understand. The comment hit Jamal like a slap. He clenched his fists under the table, forcing himself to stay composed. He knew Mark's subtle dig wasn't just about the report, it was a pattern. A familiar sting that reminded him he was seen as different, not fully belonging. After the meeting, Jamal returned to his desk, trying to shake off the humiliation. He was interrupted by Mark, who leaned casually against the edge of his workspace. Jamal, Mark said, his tone deceptively casual. Pack your things. You're done here. What? I don't understand, Jamal stammered. I've met every deadline, delivered every report, and Mark waved a hand dismissively. It doesn't matter. HR will take care of the rest. You're terminated, effective immediately. A hush fell over the office. Colleagues stared in disbelief. Jamal's heart pounded, his mouth dry. Everything he had built, years of dedication, late nights, problem-solving, teamwork, was dismissed in a few sentences. Clara Nguyen, the HR manager, stepped forward immediately, her expression sharp and professional. "Mark, wait. Let's discuss this privately first," she said firmly. "This is final," Mark replied, but Clara didn't budge. She could see the pattern, the prejudice, the unfair treatment. She knew this was not just a procedural matter. It was discrimination, plain and simple. "Jamal, come with me," Clara said gently, putting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll handle this the right way. You don't deserve to be treated like this." As Jamal followed Clara, a mixture of fear, anger, and vulnerability crashed over him. He realized that the fight ahead wouldn't just be about his job. It would be about justice, dignity, and confronting systemic prejudice. Inside her office, Clara began asking questions, taking notes, and gathering preliminary evidence. Jamal, though still shaking, felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone. "This isn't over," Clara said firmly. "We're going to make sure they can't just treat you like this and get away with it." Jamal nodded, a mix of relief and determination settling in his chest. For the first time that day, he felt the spark of resolve. Standing up for himself wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face what came next. Jamal sat in his apartment, staring blankly at the ceiling. The firing replayed in his mind like a cruel, looping video. Every word Mark had said, every sneer, every dismissive gesture burned into his memory. He felt the heavy weight of shame and anger pressing down on him, though he knew none of it was truly his fault. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister, Ayana. "Jamal, are you okay? Mom's worried. Don't let them get to you." He typed back slowly. "I'm okay. Just trying to breathe." His mother, hearing the tone in his voice during a quick call, came over the next day. She enveloped him in a hug, holding him tight as if to shield him from the world. "They can't take away your worth, Jamal," she whispered. "Don't let them." His father sat nearby, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't say much, but his presence was steady. Jamal felt both gratitude and guilt. He hated being the cause of worry for his family, but he couldn't ignore the injustice he had faced. Over the next few days, Jamal reflected on his time at the company. He remembered moments that now stood out clearly. Ideas dismissed in meetings, coworkers appropriating his suggestions, promotions given to less qualified colleagues. Subtle microaggressions that once seemed minor now painted a larger picture of bias. Jamal's internal dialogue churned. Was it always like this? Was I just blind? Or did I just hope the world would treat me fairly? Colleagues reached out cautiously. Some sent supportive messages. "We know you're brilliant. Don't let Mark define your value." Others remained silent, either afraid or unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truth. Clara Nguyen, the HR manager, became his lifeline. She met him in a quiet cafe, laptop open, showing evidence she had gathered. "Jamal, I've been documenting everything," Clara said. "Emails, reports, your performance records. Mark's actions aren't just unfair, they're illegal. Discrimination, wrongful termination. This goes beyond just a personal dispute." Jamal looked at the spreadsheet Clara had compiled. Every date, every email, every comment meticulously noted. His anger simmered, tempered by a budding resolve. "What's next?" he asked, finally feeling a flicker of control. Clara leaned forward. "We confront this carefully. HR will follow policy and will involve legal counsel if necessary. You'll have support, but you need to be prepared to stand your ground." The first confrontation with Mark had left him shaken, but now Jamal began strategizing. He reflected on all the times he had held back, avoided confrontation, or swallowed his pride to maintain peace. Now He understood silence only allowed injustice to continue. At work, whispers continued. Jamal's former teammates exchanged glances, unsure of where they stood. Some were genuinely remorseful for not speaking up sooner. Others stayed on the sidelines. Jamal realized the complexity of systemic issues. Bias wasn't always overt, but its effects were deeply harmful. One afternoon, Jamal met with Clara again. "Some of your colleagues are willing to testify," Clara said. "They've seen Mark's repeated behavior. It's time to gather their statements. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about changing the culture here." Jamal hesitated. The fear of backlash was real. What if they turn on me? What if I lose everything? Clara placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've already lost nothing, Jamal. You've lost a boss who didn't respect you. Everything else, your talent, integrity, support remains. And you're not alone." Slowly, Jamal's fear gave way to determination. He began organizing his documentation, preparing for the formal proceedings. He reread emails, compiled performance reviews, and recounted instances of subtle discrimination he had endured for years. Each piece strengthened his confidence. Meanwhile, news of Mark's behavior started to leak through office grapevines. More colleagues came forward, quietly documenting incidents they had witnessed, remarks about Jamal's work ethic, dismissive comments about his ideas, and inappropriate jokes. Systemic bias became undeniable. At home, Jamal wrestled with self-doubt. There were nights when he stared at the ceiling, questioning his worth, wondering if the fight would ever be fair. But then he remembered the pride his family always expressed, the support of Clara, and the sense of justice that had awakened within him. Maybe standing up isn't just about me, he thought. Maybe it's about ensuring no one else has to go through this. Clara guided him through each step. They discussed legal strategies, potential counterarguments from Mark, and how to document interactions meticulously. The preparation was exhaustive, but Jamal felt empowered for the first time since the firing. One afternoon, Clara said, "Jamal, this is your moment. When we present the evidence, you speak your truth calmly and clearly. Facts speak louder than emotion." Jamal nodded, inhaling deeply. "I can do that. I have to do that." The emotional weight of this preparation was immense. Jamal confronted the reality that standing up against systemic racism required courage, patience, and resilience. He reflected on past times he had been overlooked or dismissed, seeing them now as part of a pattern, not personal failings. As the meeting date approached, Jamal noticed a subtle shift. His colleagues began treating him differently, not with fear, but with respect. Some offered support quietly, others still remained wary. But Jamal realized that courage often inspired action, even in others who felt powerless. Finally, the day arrived. Jamal, Clara, and legal counsel prepared to meet with senior executives. Jamal felt nerves, yes, but also clarity. He knew he had prepared thoroughly, documented everything, and had all eyes. He was no longer a passive victim of Mark's prejudice. He was an advocate for justice, integrity, and accountability. He paused before entering the conference room, reflecting, "I've been treated unfairly. But my value is not determined by Mark. Today, I reclaim my dignity." Jamal stepped into the conference room, heart pounding but spine straight. Clara and the legal counsel followed closely behind him, each carrying folders thick with evidence. The senior executives were already seated, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and unease. At the far end of the table sat Mark Reynolds, attempting a confident, casual posture that belied his growing discomfort. "Thank you for joining us," Clara began, her voice firm but composed. "We are here today to address a serious matter regarding workplace conduct, discrimination, and wrongful termination." Jamal took a deep breath, recalling the weeks of preparation, the nights spent cataloging every slight and insult. He opened his own folder, sliding it toward the center of the table. "I've been with this company for over 5 years," he began, voice steady. "I've contributed to every major project in my department, consistently met or exceeded targets, and always maintained professional relationships with my colleagues. I take pride in my work, and I've always approached my role with integrity." He paused. Glancing at Mark, the man's confident facade flickered, a small twitch betraying awareness that the evidence might undo him. "However," Jamal continued, "I was recently terminated under false pretenses. I was accused of a procedural error that I did not commit. What followed was not just a personal grievance. It was a pattern of discriminatory behavior that I have experienced for years." Clara interjected smoothly. "We have compiled a comprehensive record of these incidents. Emails in which Mr. Reynolds dismisses Mr. Harris's suggestions while promoting similar ideas from others. Notes from meetings where Mr. Harris was publicly belittled, and documented instances where racial bias influenced decision-making regarding promotions and recognition." She laid the documents across the table, sliding them toward the executives. Jamal watched as their expressions shifted, eyes scanning evidence that was irrefutable. One of the executives cleared his throat. We weren't aware of the extent of this." Jamal felt a surge of clarity. This was more than personal vindication. It was a chance to shine light on a pattern of systemic injustice. "It's not just about me," he said. "It's about ensuring that future employees are treated fairly, that talent and effort are recognized regardless of race, and that discrimination is not ignored." Mark's face reddened. This is all taken out of context." "I never," Clara cut him off. "We have multiple witnesses who are willing to testify to these patterns. Emails, reports, and documented incidents corroborate Mr. Harris's experience. The evidence is clear." The tension in the room thickened. Mark shifted uncomfortably, realizing the weight of the situation. He attempted to justify himself, but each excuse was dismantled by documented facts. His attempts at charm and deflection failed against the meticulous record of his discriminatory behavior. Jamal's colleagues were called upon to provide statements. One by one, they recounted instances where Mark dismissed ideas, made biased remarks, or displayed favoritism. Each testimony added weight to the mounting case. The room grew silent as the pattern became undeniable. Finally, Clara addressed the executives directly. "This company has a legal and ethical obligation to act. Failure to address discrimination not only violates labor laws, but undermines the culture and integrity of the organization. Immediate action is required." Mark tried one last defense. "I didn't mean for any of this." Jamal shook his head slightly, a quiet but firm gesture that signaled he would not be intimidated. "Intent is irrelevant. The impact of your actions has caused harm, and accountability must follow. I am asking that justice be done for me and for every employee who has faced similar treatment." There was a long pause. Then a senior executive nodded solemnly. "Based on the evidence and testimonies, Mark Reynolds is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort him from the premises." Jamal felt a mixture of relief and vindication. The humiliation, the fear, and the frustration that had weighed so heavily now began to lift. Mark was escorted out, his protests fading into the background. The room exhaled collectively, a tension broken but a lesson firmly planted. Clara turned to Jamal. "You handled this with professionalism, courage, and dignity. This isn't just a personal victory. It sets a precedent. Your actions will influence company policy, culture, and accountability moving forward." Jamal nodded, emotion rising in his chest. He thought of the months of fear and doubt, the sleepless nights, the sting of humiliation. And yet, all of it had led to this moment, a moment of justice, recognition, and empowerment. One colleague approached him quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner," she said. You've shown me what courage looks like. I won't stay silent again." Jamal smiled, a mixture of warmth and triumph. "It's not just about me. It's about all of us, making this a place where people are valued for their work and character, not judged by the color of their skin." In the following days, company leadership implemented systemic changes. Anti-racism training was mandated, reporting procedures were clarified, and diversity initiatives gained real momentum. Employees who once felt powerless found a renewed voice. Jamal, once a quiet contributor, became a symbol of integrity and resilience. Sitting at his desk again, Jamal reflected on the ordeal. He had faced fear, injustice, and discrimination, but he had also discovered his own strength, dignity, and voice. He realized that standing up for oneself, even in the face of systemic bias, could create meaningful change. Clara dropped by his office one afternoon. "Are you ready to return?" she asked. "We'd like you to come back, with assurances that your work environment is now supportive." Jamal considered it. He could return, reclaiming his place in a reformed system, or he could pursue opportunities aligned with his values elsewhere. He smiled, thinking of the possibilities. "Yes, but I also want to mentor others, to make sure they know how to stand up too." Clara nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit. Change comes not just from policy, but from people like you who lead by example." Jamal leaned back, feeling a calm resolve settle over him. He knew the journey wasn't over. The fight against systemic racism was ongoing, but he had taken a stand, and that courage would ripple far beyond one incident. The formal confrontation had ended. Justice had been served in this moment. And Jamal understood now that resilience, integrity, and speaking one's truth could transform not just a career, but a community, a culture, and ultimately, a life. Jamal returned to the office a few days later, walking through the doors with a quiet confidence. The air felt different, lighter, charged with a sense of accountability and renewal. Colleagues greeted him with nods and smiles, a subtle but profound shift from the cautious glances that had once met him. He settled into his desk, unpacking his laptop and folders. Around him, conversations carried tones of respect and optimism. Jamal realized that the culture of fear and silence was starting to change. People who had once stayed quiet were now speaking up. Encouraged by the visible consequences of injustice, Clara stopped by his desk, smiling warmly. "How does it feel to be back?" Jamal took a deep breath. "Empowering. It's still surreal, but I feel seen. Not just for my work, but for who I am." Clara nodded. "That's the start of real change. Policies matter, but people like you who stand firm create lasting impact." Over the next few weeks, Jamal observed tangible shifts in the workplace. HR rolled out comprehensive anti-racism training. Reporting procedures were clarified, making it easier for employees to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Diversity initiatives and mentorship programs were launched, ensuring opportunities were accessible to all. Regardless of background, Jamal was offered the chance to return to his previous role, with assurances of a supportive environment. He also had the option to mentor younger Black professionals entering the industry, a responsibility he accepted eagerly. He realized that his experience, though painful, could serve as guidance and inspiration for others. One afternoon, a new employee approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Harris, I just started, and I'm nervous. I've heard some things about the office culture. Any advice?" Jamal smiled, remembering his own fears. "Trust yourself, do your work with integrity, and never stay silent if something feels wrong. Courage doesn't mean you're fearless. It means you act even when you're afraid. And remember, you're not alone." Outside the office, news of Mark's termination and the company's subsequent reforms spread within professional networks. Local media highlighted the story as an example of accountability and the importance of confronting workplace discrimination. Jamal received messages from people across the country, sharing similar experiences and thanking him for his bravery. At home, Jamal reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The humiliation, anger, and self-doubt had been intense, but they had forged his resilience. He had learned that injustice could be confronted with dignity, that truth and evidence held power, and that the support of allies, Clara and his colleagues, was invaluable. He also understood the personal transformation. He no longer felt invisible or powerless. Each act of courage, each moment of speaking up, had reinforced his self-worth. He felt pride not just in surviving the ordeal, but in turning it into a catalyst for change. One evening, Jamal gathered his close friends and family. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about creating a space where people can work, contribute, and succeed without being judged for who they are. We've taken a step forward, but the work continues." His mother squeezed his hand. "You've turned pain into power. You've shown that standing up matters." Jamal smiled, thinking of the road ahead. There would always be challenges, and systemic bias would not disappear overnight. But he now carried the knowledge that resilience, integrity, and courage could make a difference. One voice, when supported by truth and all eyes, could ripple outward and inspire transformation. As he walked through the office the next morning, Jamal felt a sense of completion and purpose. Colleagues greeted him warmly, some with quiet admiration, others with newfound respect. He had reclaimed his place, not only in the workplace, but within himself. In his internal reflection, Jamal realized that justice had been served, dignity restored, and lessons learned. Standing up against discrimination was not just an act of self-preservation. It was a commitment to the values of fairness, respect, and empowerment. Jamal smiled as he sat at his desk, opening a new project folder. He was ready to continue contributing, mentoring, and advocating, not out of anger, but out of a firm belief that courage and integrity could transform both lives and workplaces. The story closed on a note of hope. Systemic injustice could be confronted. Resilience could turn pain into empowerment. And standing up with truth and dignity could inspire lasting change. Jamal had faced prejudice, survived it, and emerged stronger, a reminder that one person's courage can light the way for many. Jamal stood by the office window, looking out at the city skyline. The sunlight bounced off the glass buildings, casting long, warm reflections across the room. It felt symbolic after all he had endured, after the humiliation, the fear, and the anger. He now saw clarity and possibility. He thought about the day Mark was escorted out, the whispers that had rippled through the office, and the pride he felt as colleagues began acknowledging his worth. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a reminder that injustice could be confronted, that courage mattered, and that standing up could spark change. Clara approached with a folder in hand. "HR finalized the new diversity programs," she said. "There's also a mentorship initiative starting next month. You'll be leading it." Jamal nodded, feeling a mix of humility and excitement. "I want to help others see that they belong here, no matter what obstacles they face. That's the part that matters most." His phone buzzed. Messages of support from colleagues, former clients, and professional networks filled the screen. Many shared stories of similar struggles, thanking him for paving the way, for showing that integrity and resilience could overcome bias. Jamal smiled softly. He had become not just a survivor, but a beacon. At home that evening, his family gathered around the dinner table. The conversation flowed with warmth and laughter, but beneath it was a quiet acknowledgement of the storm Jamal had weathered. His mother reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "You've taught us all something important," she said. "Courage isn't about never feeling fear. It's about standing firm when you do. Jamal felt a swell of gratitude. The fear and doubt that had haunted him were still memories, but they no longer controlled him. Every challenge, every microaggression, every unfair accusation had strengthened his resolve. He had learned to face adversity with dignity, to trust in his own abilities, and to seek allies who shared his vision of fairness. The next morning, as he walked into the office, Jamal carried himself with calm assurance. Colleagues greeted him, not with hesitation, but with respect. Some approached to share ideas, others to ask questions, and a few simply nodded in recognition of the perseverance they had witnessed. Jamal thought about the broader lesson. Systems of injustice could be challenged, and while prejudice might linger in pockets of the world, courage and integrity had the power to create real change. Standing up was not just about defending oneself. It was about shaping the environment for everyone who came after. Sitting at his desk, Jamal opened a blank document. He began writing a note to the new mentees who would join the program. You are seen. You are valued. You belong. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. They reflected not just the fight he had faced, but the hope he wanted to pass on. He knew challenges would continue, but the fear that had once weighed him down was gone. In its place was clarity, purpose, and the quiet power of knowing he had reclaimed his space in the world. Looking around the office one last time before the day began in earnest, Jamal whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." He smiled, confident, empowered, and ready to face whatever came next, knowing that resilience, dignity, and courage had the power to transform lives, not just his own, but the lives of those who would follow his path. The story closed on a note of hope and empowerment. Prejudice had been confronted, dignity restored, and the journey forward illuminated by integrity and courage. Jamal had survived, grown, and emerged stronger, an enduring reminder that standing up against injustice can inspire lasting change.